Cara. Welcome back to the Mórrígan Academy podcast, where we root Irish lore in everyday life, not some ivory tower fantasy. I am Laura O'Brien, a Mórrígan priest of 20 plus years, and your guide through blood, battle, and boundary work. So today kicks off the first week of our Mórrígan intensive prep. Whether you end up joining us in June in the 6-month programme, the Mórrígan Intensive, or not, I'm hoping that the next few weeks will give you a really good grounding in what it's like to work with the Mórrígan, to dedicate yourself to the Mórrígan. So absolutely stick with me for this. But today we're going to be looking at meeting the Mórrígan where you are. So we're tackling the biggest roadblock that I hear every single year, which is I'm not ready. So spoiler alert, you already are. Or I suppose alternative spoiler alert, you're never going to be ready, or you're never going to feel you're ready. So you got to just start, right? So the first myth or misconception about building a relationship with the Mórrígan is that only scholars belong. And I once had a student who teaches medieval history at a university, and they had spent years parsing manuscripts, but as soon as the Mórrígan knocked, they froze, convinced that they'd need a second PhD just in case. I mean, I don't even have a first PhD, so I don't know where that was coming from. But here's the truth. The Mórrígan is not impressed by CVs. I was working for the Mórrígan long before I got my master's in Irish history. What she really wants is curiosity and courage. And when we think of the old Filly, the poets, seers who held no bureaucratic titles as such, they had jobs. Their qualification was their devotion. And showing up, learning the Rosk forms, connecting to the other world, listening for truth day after day, doing the work was how they did the work. So if you can open up a text, Comma Chira, the Tombo Gavana, any myth that makes your pulse ping, you're halfway there. The rest is practice. I do have a few resources on the blog at mórrigan.academy. They are translations of original source text. You can definitely have a look at them. And there's a really useful video. It's not specifically related to the Mórrígan, but it is on the Irish Pagan School channel. And it is about starting with Irish paganism. There's the cover of it is Irish paganism with ivy growing on the screen, basically. So have a look at that one. I can't remember the exact name of it, unfortunately. I'll link it below. But there's some practices and that kind of thing that are in there as well. So whether you're going for just ordinary spirituality, like base level kind of foundational stuff, there's resources for you. If you want to meet the Mórrígan specifically, there's resources for you. The reason that I'm sending you to that video is that there's book recommendations in it. Just the first simple two to start with, which would be Thomas Kinsella's The Tawn and Morgan Daimler's collection of translations, which is called Through the Mist. So even if you don't go to that video, that's where I would start with the lore. But you don't have to be a scholar, I promise. And I give so much support for getting through the original source lore and getting to know the original source lore. We run a whole month of it during the Mórrígan Intensive. Everybody is starting at the same place, and everybody is starting with beginner's mind, and everybody can keep up. Absolutely. So, myth number 2, or misconception number 2, ritual perfection is required. This is like the perfect altar, or the perfect costume, or the perfect ritual with the perfect people done at the perfect phase of the moon and all this, right? I had a student who had a background in corporate law or something like that, I want to say, who spent weeks sourcing imported feathers, native Irish feathers, hand-picked from specific locations. I don't know who they got to do this for them, but they spent a fortune on it. Getting the perfect chalice designed and made, and then postponed their practice because nothing felt authentic enough. And meanwhile, the great queen is tapping her foot waiting for them, right? But just this like myth of perfection, this myth of like having to have all this ritual crap is absolutely toxic. Ritual is action, not aesthetics. Like, you could bless a single blade of grass in an apartment and speak one line of Rosk poetry and crack open more connection than any Pinterest worthy altar ever could, honestly. Sovereignty practice, your own sense of power and purpose and connection and relationship, lives in your willingness to act, not your fucking filter set on Instagram. So myth number 3 is that you would have to wait for the right conditions or, you know, the perfect time in your life or whatever. And I've actually lost count of how many prospective students would tell me, once my schedule clears, I'll dive in. I actually had a conversation today with a very good friend who was basically told that they had to do the Mórrígan intensive last year and said, oh, I really can't, I'm too busy, but I'll definitely do it next year. And then today they approached me and they said, I'm actually busier than I was last year, this year, and I'm more burnt out, but I just have to do it. So let me know when it opens up. They're actually going to be joining us as a moderator. So I'm very happy with how that all turned out, right? But the important thing is the right conditions never happen, right? Newsflash, the Cathmát era wasn't fought in perfect weather, and prophecy didn't wait for calm nights and a clear schedule. Like, the Mórrígan steps into chaos. I had another student who was living in like a cramped flat in London. They had no hearth, they had no hillside to, you know, wobble up and down of. But they found these like liminal places in their local park at lunchtime by the shores of a pond there. And they learned to pause under the same oak that had watched over Viking raids in that particular park. It wasn't a park at the time, obviously, but the oak tree was there. And 10 minutes of mindful listening, speaking some poetry or prophecy, you know, getting moved in that way, or reading some of the mythology in translation. And your sovereignty is rooted into the concrete jungle that you happen to be living in, if you do. If you can breathe, you can practice. I promise. Like, your conditions are never going to be perfect. It's just, it doesn't happen, right? So I just want to like revisit a little wobble that we all share sometimes, right? Am I making this up? Am I just making all this up? How do I know that it's real? And like, one of my students, I know there's a lot of case studies here, but like, one of my students reported to me a couple of years back that they were waking to this persistent like raven croak ringtone on their phone, except it wasn't a ringtone at all. Their mind was like, oh, imagine that, and like, it's nothing, dismiss of it, right? And then they found 3 corvid feathers on their windowsill. And they showed me the journal entry a while later, and it was like, either I'm seeing birds or I'm seeing a calling. And that moment when doubt and devotion collided for them is exactly where their work began. And they did come into the intensive program. They did make a complete go of it. And like, the idea of projection isn't disqualifying you. Like, if you track the experience with humility and curiosity, if you specifically go looking for Mórrígan signs or anything like that, it can open you up then to seeing more. And fake it till you make it can actually turn into real insight. But through all of that, like, keeping a journal, we actually have a resource at the Mórrígan Academy. It is the signs guide. If you go to the blog, there's a link to it in the sidebar on the blog, and it's, is the Mórrígan calling you? What are the signs? So there's a couple of different places on the website that you'll see it. You enter in your email and you'll get delivered a free guide. It's 7 pages or 9 pages or 10 pages or something, right? But it has a little workbook in it that you can track these signs. And honestly, like the idea of like, am I just making this up? You need data to answer that. You need to understand if there are actually patterns happening, or if it is just your imagination or wishful thinking or projection or anything like that. So having the data, doing the work is really important for gaining real insight into this, right? Now, for a little kind of mini practice, we could do something like a willingness vow this week. So grab whatever you have, post-it, some scratch paper, a napkin, a piece of toilet roll, a bullet journal, whatever you have, right? And we're going to make a willingness vow. So you can pause this or whatever, but write down, I vow to show up for truth, even when I doubt the call. I vow to show up for truth, even when I doubt the call. That's it. 2 lines. 1 line, depending on how you write it. But what I want you to do is look at that and become aware of your entry point. Why are you listening? What is it about the Mórrígan that is interesting you? So next I want you to name your doubt, really look at it. What's the story that you're telling yourself that's stopping you? That's stopping you from your own spirituality, that's stopping you from relationship with the Mórrígan, that's stopping you from exploring your heritage, that's stopping you from spiritual practice in the day-to-day. What's the story? And then third, we look at the actual vow itself, which is, I will show up for truth even when I doubt. So really think about that. Think about what it means, what that would look like, what kind of a person you would need to be to show up for truth even when you're doubting. How would that look like in your life, in your family, in your relationships, in your activism, in your job, in your school, in your parenting? What kind of a difference would that make in the world if everybody was doing that? Showing up for truth. So whatever you wrote down, stick it where you're going to see it, on a mirror, on your screen lock on your phone, a picture of it, on, I don't know, wherever you're going to see it, on your computer screen or on your desk. And this tiny pledge then can be an anchor when your mind kicks in and starts to take you in all sorts of different directions. When you do doubt, then how can you show up for truth in those moments? So I want to remind you that the name Mórrígan means Great Queen or Phantom Queen. And those titles are actually so much more than any kind of human hierarchy for a start, but also they are job descriptions, because her name can be a personal name, Mórrígan. It can be a noun, the name of a person, place or thing, so literally a descriptive word that describes who or what she is really. Or it can be a title, Great Queen. And this really does go beyond these human hierarchies that we have. The idea of sovereignty that kind of comes to mind when we think about a king or a queen in human terms. The Mórrígan embodies sovereignty beyond externals like bloodline, social rank, ritual bling like crowns and crown jewels, right? The land itself speaks before she does, and it testifies to the readiness that is woven into place, not a CV. She is the essence of sovereignty. She embodies sovereignty, both as a queen herself, but also as the challenge to anybody else's sovereignty. So now that you have claimed your willingness vow, feel free to deepen the work that you're about to do with our free guide. It's called Speak the Truth, the Prophecy, Power and the Mórrígan's Call. And it includes a pattern tracking worksheet, a starter ROSC, reflection prompts. There's good stuff in it. So you can get it at mórrígan.academy/truth. And next week we're going to look at the objection about we don't have time. I don't have time to do this. And I'll share a bit about how students juggle demanding lives and still weave in sovereignty practices that stick and build relationship with the Mórrígan. So if you found value today, please leave me a review. Share it with a friend who's waiting for one day, who thinks that the Mórrígan is calling them or that they want to work with the Mórrígan, because either is possible and just haven't gotten around to it yet. If you have time to scroll on Instagram, you have time to do a very simple spiritual practice every day. It can be just as simple as lighting a candle, saying a breath, taking a breath and saying her name. Anything, any simple thing can be your spirituality, can be the start of your relationship with the Mórrígan. And please subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. Join our mailing list, get your guides, and you're going to be on our mailing list. Of course, you can unsubscribe anytime you want, but there's so much free stuff at the Mórrígan Academy. And as we work through this pre-enrollment process for the Mórrígan Intensive, which opens in June for enrollment, it only opens once a year, but as we work through this process, I'm going to be doing a lot more free resources, workshops, all the rest of it. So you'll find out about all of that by being on the mailing list. So if you get a guide, you're on the mailing list, make sure you stay on it, make sure you're opening the emails, subscribe to the podcast, all of that, right? So until then, honour the law, respect the Mórrígan and mind your sovereignty. Slán go fóill.